We got the story from the Post Millennial. Texas police arrest UT Austin students attempting to set up anti-Israel Gaza camp. Governor Greg Abbott threatens more arrests. So a ton of anti-Israel, as Greg Price calls it, pro-Hamas idiots at UT Austin tried to set up an encampment. The police moved in and engaged in mass arrests. I think we have this tweet here from Greg Abbott. He said, arrests being made right now and will continue until the crowd disperses. These protesters belong in jail. Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in Texas, period. Students joining in hate-filled anti-Semitic protests at any public college or university in Texas should be expelled. And oh boy, this is where things get interesting. We have a bunch of stories, right? You've got NYPD mass arrests at another anti-Israel protest. You've got Columbia negotiating, allowing them to stay. You've got Harvard protests popping up. Even Mike Johnson shows up to Columbia and is threatening these students. This is wild. TikTok is on the verge of being banned, and it all is centered around Israel. Here's what's interesting about the first story. So we'll get to all of that news, but there's a bunch of small stories in the bigger story. The first one I think is the most important, is Greg Abbott basically saying he's arresting people for hate speech. He's saying these protesters belong in jail. Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. Greg Abbott of Texas is saying for their hateful speech, they're being arrested or they should be in jail.
Yeah, hate speech is one of these things that I can understand why people want to say things like that, but it's such a danger of free speech that I think you have to tread really carefully. This is also something I'm seeing repeated basically with every older politician. This is very much sort of an older stance to say this is the emergence of anti-Semitism on college campuses, whereas younger protesters, activists are saying, no, you guys have gone too far. You're supporting genocide. So you're really seeing an ideological clash here.
You know, it's also really disturbing and frightening. For so many years on college campuses, it's been totally in vogue to say literally anything that you want about white people. And even though in the past I've said on this show that I reject this paradigm of whiteness, I think it's something that's been imposed upon us and that certain ethnicities such as the Irish, Italian, Polish, other Catholic ethnicities weren't considered white. The reality is people who look like me are considered white, whether that's a label I appreciate or not. And these college students have been perfectly comfortable and entitled to say literally anything they want about us. But now that they're talking about one specific minority, it's, oh my gosh, we have to arrest them and throw them in prison.
Yeah. It's funny.
And I'm not saying that the rhetoric, I'm not saying that hateful rhetoric towards any group is a good thing, but what I am saying is it's really interesting that they were literally able to criticize the majority of this country for years and years and years, and none of them got in any trouble. And then people sit there and go, oh my gosh, they're criticizing other ethnic groups. How could this possibly have happened? Well, I can tell you how it happened. You told them that that was okay for the past several decades, and they got away with it for the past several decades.
They don't see the distinction that older generations did.
Yeah.
What I don't like about this is the conflation of Israel criticism with anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that as well.
And I think it's also important to point out many of these people are anti-Semitic. And there was a video out of Yale where a Jewish guy is trying to walk through campus and they stop him and they block him for literally no reason. Yeah. And the reason I've heard people say is like, oh, but they're acting shady and weird and they're filming. And I'm like, dude, you can't just go up to somebody for that reason, right?
Yeah. Also, Yale's going to be confused when they find out their founder is Jewish, right? Eli Yale? I could be wrong there.
I don't know about that. One thing that I've just seen culturally and working with young people is that we've gotten into this habit of feigning victimhood. And so what is the difference between really being threatened and having your feelings hurt? And what people are seeing is that if they are, if they do the feigning victimhood very well, then, and it works, then they just keep doing it over and over again. So I don't know, it does get into that freedom of speech thing. It's like, are people really are they scared for their safety or do they just not like what other people are saying? Like there was a story of the kid that I think he said that somebody was an illegal alien in his English class, and the Mexican kid. I'm from Mexico. I moved here when I was 2, and that illegal alien joke was a joke back then. I'm just fine. I survived it.
Well, this kid didn't make a joke. The kid in school was asked to write about aliens, and he said, "You're talking about illegal aliens or space aliens?" And they were like, "How dare you!"
Right,
dude.
Right.
I'm totally wrong about Yale, by the way. I just fact checked myself.
Oh, okay. But anyway, yeah. So I don't know. What do you think about it?
So here, what's going on in Texas? Look, if Greg Abbott wants to arrest people because they're trying to occupy a public space, keeping other people out, and basically seizing territory to keep to create a Chaz Chop kind of situation, then he needs to say that. Because what he tweeted out right now is, you're not allowed to protest and be hateful at the same time.
Yeah, words matter.
Yeah, no. That's not okay, Greg Abbott. Like, if people want to march down the street and say what they want to say, even if I disagree with it, that's what free speech is.
Yeah.
I agree with removing these people, however. I don't think they should be at Columbia, and it's because they're setting up an occupation. Peaceful protests are great, but if they're taking over the common space from other people, and these videos come out where they're like, we're going to link hands and then push them out, okay, you're shut down. Now you're occupying territory and taking it away from the people who were there first. And that's wrong, and that shouldn't happen.
I think it was from Harvard of people rushing onto the green to start setting up an encampment. I mean, It is a intentional growing position, right? This is something that, I think you're probably the best one to talk about this with Occupy Wall Street, but it is something they want to set up a effectively satellite network at college campuses across the U.S., starting predominantly in the Northeast, where a lot of the colleges already lean towards a leftist progressive worldview.
Yeah. Well, what is dangerous too is, and I saw this when the whole BLM thing was happening, I was managing all these different TikTok houses and I was totally unaware of politics. And the kids were like, this is cool to go and protest BLM stuff. And they're like, we want to put a banner outside. I'm like, just do whatever you want. I mean, if that's the popular thing. And what happens is if that becomes the popular thing to be anti-Semitic, just because people are getting clout or something by being that way. You were saying that you were called a Zionist. I mean, I heard a podcast where there was like a Jewish influencer saying that being a Zionist isn't even like bad, or so I don't even know what it is. I just know it's unpopular, and I don't want to be called that.
So Zionist is basically like, if you're anti-Israel, it's their word. It's white supremacy. It's racist. It's a catch-all term for people who are not aligned with my worldview. So
that's what it's turned into, right? At least now.
So, and it functions the same way. Let's say you're like an unrepentant white supremacist marching around in Klan robes. They go, haha, you're a white supremacist. And the guy goes, okay. Let's say you're like a moderate liberal or classical liberal or right-leaning individual, and you don't like racism. And so you say things like, I believe in meritocracy. They go, you're a racist white supremacist. The Zionist thing is, there's literal Zionism where someone believes in the creation of a Jewish state in Israel and they want to have the Holy Land and all of that stuff. And then there's varying degrees of how people describe it.
And that doesn't have a negative connotation, correct?
Well, it certainly does.
Right.
I mean,
the
idea of wanting to create a country, some people view very negatively, colonization.
Yeah.
Then there's like me and other more libertarian people who are like, I don't think the U.S. should be funding foreign military expenditures and whatever Israel is doing. And they go, so you think Israel exists? And I'm like, well, there's quite literally a country called Israel. Zionist! Because in the mind of many of these people, Israel being a fabrication created with the whatever, however they want to describe the creation of Israel, anyone who acknowledges that it does exist is also a Zionist. And I'm like, I'm not saying it should or shouldn't. I don't know. It's a country with a government and they have a military and there's a war going on. And they're like, so many of these people don't think there's an Israel. They say it's Palestine. It's occupied Palestine. If you call it Israel, you are a Zionist. So it's like, I don't even know, dude. All I'm saying is we're America and we should just stay out of it.
Yeah. I think young people, they don't know, right? I don't barely know. I mean, I watch you guys and I try to get the information, but it's like, unless you're deep in this, all you see on TikTok, I saw it, back, I think it was 2020, that if you like Trump or if you say you like Trump, then you're a terrible person. You can't even say it out loud. And so everybody just wants to fit in. I mean, young people, you want to fit into the group. So if something sounds bad, and then you're just going to go with the flow. And I think that could be dangerous as well.
I would say all of these students, they have no idea what they're protesting.
Right.
But there's an interesting question around this too, because with, Greg Abbott basically tweeting that hate speech will get you arrested, which is hilarious. There's a question of if these people are saying they are Hamas.
Oh, that's not.
Are they saying they're a terrorist organization?
Yeah,
right?
They are.
Yeah, but there is a difference, as you mentioned, between that and quote unquote hate speech.
No, but what I'm saying is, you have that video where the woman yells, "We are Hamas." Should she be arrested and charged? Say, okay, you've sworn allegiance to a terror organization, and now any crime you commit is in alignment. I mean, how do we handle that? Do we just say, no, if someone is clearly an American college student, they can't possibly be Hamas?
But why would that be true, though?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like that's an absurdity. Mm-hmm. Certainly, radicalized young people could join a terror organization. Mm-hmm. Then is the question, all they really did was commit a misdemeanor, therefore they won't be charged with terror. No, that's not how the law is supposed to work. I think we get into really dangerous territory if we start arresting Columbia college students who are yelling they are Hamas, not understanding, and then what are we going to do? Send them to Guantanamo Bay? We can't do that. But then think about the precedent. The precedent being that people could literally swear allegiance to a terror organization, go around committing mass crimes, and then those who are only involved slightly or aren't actively involved in killing but are blockading things, we let them go. Like, no, you're part of a terror organization. We charge you for it.
If you were Greg Abbott, like, what do you think the message to put out and say would be?
Oh, he should have tweeted, occupying public space without a permit takes that space away from other people who have paid for this. It is the seizure of the commons by an ideological group, and we won't tolerate it. Done.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, I think that makes sense. All of the loftiness about hate, et cetera, anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in Texas. I mean, like, again, what about like anti-whiteness, anti-blackness? Are all forms of hatred or not liking a group of people not constitutionally protected? It seems like it's an overstep.
It makes me feel like they are looking at what the other governors and college presidents are saying and being like, what's the acceptable line your office is putting out? Okay, you're saying anti-Semitism, we'll say it too then. Like, there's a lack of sort of critical analysis of what the core issue is here. Like you're saying, like occupying a public space for an ideological group, especially in a way that potentially, advocates for violence, you can see some conflict. Like there are things they could be concerned about. But again, it seems like everyone is focusing on the ideological or
it seems more
the
common
ethnic
sense
issues.
based versus political and ideological based. I mean,
I just think it's funny that Greg Abbott thought criticizing anti-Semitism was like the way to go, because it's hate speech. It's like the right has been demanding free speech, but this was his signal to, I guess, like moderate liberals or whatever.
I think there's a fear of considering too soft on people who are perceived as anti-Semitic and therefore becoming anti-Semitic yourself, right? Like they are trying to fall correctly on the side of this issue when your point is completely valid. Like they can just say this isn't acceptable for this institution for whatever else. They don't have to make it as political as they're making it. In fact, I think they're almost making it worse by saying
it adds more fuel to the fire.
I agree.
It's going to get way better.
Well, and I just want to mention this. I think you're right that the right is kind of fumbling, and I won't even say the right. Conservatives and conservative politicians are fumbling by talking about hate speech, by talking about anti-Semitism, etc. I mean, there is an obvious strategic win here for conservatives that actually involves talking about our own country instead of other countries. When someone comes in here and says that they are Hamas, you go, okay, there are people in the United States of America saying that they're Hamas. Okay, like if we're talking about affairs in foreign countries where horrific acts of violence are occurring, maybe that can be for us motivation to figuring out who's in our country, who's crossing our borders, what's going on here.
No, we can't know that.
Yeah, exactly.
That would take all the mystery out of the Biden administration.
Exactly. We have to be like extremely intensely focused on what's happening in the Middle East. We shouldn't be focusing on what's happening at the border.
I mean, I think the right to protest is really important. Like I said the other night, I think that it would be really cool if the American youth rallied for a border wall or rallied for something that would impact domestically, that would help people that they are going to live beside. But instead, this foreign war is basically dominating our news cycle. I think it's important that we analyze what's going on. On the other hand, like it is interesting to me that the youth at the most elite institutions in America decided this was the issue that they were willing to do anything for. I mean, I was watching interviews with protesters at Columbia today, and their graduation is coming up. The school's announced they're going to go fully remote for the rest of the semester or offer online classes.
But how long is that? It's like a week, isn't it?
It's not that long. It's maybe like 2 or 3 weeks. But they were saying like, if the university says you can't get your diploma if you're participating in this, would you go without your diploma? And she was like, well, this cause is, I'd have to think about it, but this cause is so much bigger than, my diploma. It's a small sacrifice to make. And you want to be like, and this girl's wearing sunglasses, she's covered. Like, you can't identify, I mean, I couldn't identify her, maybe someone on campus could, but there is this, there's a narrative that the people involved in this are having, that this is like their big contribution to the world, to shifting the world into a correct direction, which means that there is a level of ideological devoutness that they might be willing to adhere to, which it makes it concerning that it's spreading throughout the U.S. and seems to be getting more chaotic at each school.
It's going to get way bigger.
Yeah.
During Occupy Wall Street, I'll tell you what happened. In the first week, a couple thousand people the first weekend, a couple thousand people should have protested. They left right away. That was the first weekend. The first week, there was literally 5 people in the park. I was there. And we were standing under this big blue tarp in the rain. There was nothing in Zuccotti. A cop walked over in a trench coat, smiled, and said something like "Good luck," and then left. And we were like, "This is funny." And then I asked him, I was like, "So is anything happening? Like, what are we doing?" I thought it was fun. I was like, being in New York for the first time, and they were like, "No, it's because everyone's going to be back on the weekend." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." That next weekend, a bunch of people did show up, and there were big protests and big marches. There was no real tents or encampment. It wasn't allowed. And then during a march, Tony Baloney, they called him, Anthony Bologna, walked up to 4 girls who were not in the march and were standing on the sidewalk yelling and sprayed them in the face for no reason.
Oh, wow.
And then there's a video of them screaming in agony. They were just standing on the sidewalk. And that video at the time was the most viral video in internet history. It got 1.3 million views in a couple of hours. So this is like...
Well, I'm sorry, what college was that again?
This was New York City. This is not a college.
Oh, no, in New York City.
Right, it's Occupy
okay.
Wall Street.
Okay,
right.
okay.
So this is on Broadway, where this took place, just outside of Zuccotti Park. And after this incident, this video goes massively viral. You get, I think SNL or someone, or Daily Show, they did a bit called Christopher Maloney from SVU as Christopher Maloney is Tony Baloney. And it was a bit about a cop who was trigger happy with pepper spray and would go around pepper spraying everybody. It was good. But that video goes viral, and then all of a sudden Occupy, which was a New York protest, turned into a nationwide thing. So with these actions, and especially with Greg Abbott saying it's anti-Semitism, he's basically dumping gasoline on a fire. These people have no idea how to deal with mass unrest. I got to be honest, if they did literally nothing, it would have gone away. But what happens is New York allows it, and then people start posting videos, it builds attention, then other places start doing it. When the cops come in, that's what they're hoping for, so that they can create the propaganda to be like, look, help, we're being attacked. Oh, the cops are after us. Greg Abbott just did them the biggest favor imaginable by saying anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. Because now what's going to happen is conservatives are going to say, oh, come on. You can't conflate criticizing a country with being anti-Semitic. And then you're going to get the left being like, look at this. You see how they're lying. Then you're going to get, the right anti-Israel side, and they're all going to be unified against this. And they're going to point the finger at Greg Abbott. He is giving them the propaganda they need to rally more people.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this is very difficult for either side to handle strategically, because this is not an issue that really breaks down along party lines the way that issues we tend to see mass protests about too. So for example, back in 2020, when you had the BLM riots happening, the reality is basically all of the Democratic Party, anti-establishment and pro-establishment, was totally in favor of that movement. When it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, that breaks down not so much along party lines, but along establishment versus anti-establishment lines. And so Joe Biden can't really say a whole lot about this without alienating a large fraction of his voter base. And so if this does end up becoming violent, there's a question, and there's a question of whether law and order is going to be enforced or whether they're not allowed to be violent. Because we know if the Democratic Party sided with them, or the Democratic Party in its totality sided with them, they would literally be able to do whatever they wanted.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.